All right, moving on to 5.4, we're going to talk about economic liberalization, which is a very important concept, as they all are. So economic liberalization is a process that occurs when a state reduces its governmental role in the economy, and it embraces free market mechanisms, capitalism. Essentially, they're taking their hands off the toys of the economy and letting the people work it out a little bit. So this can include eliminating government subsidies and tariffs. Tariffs, again, are taxes on imports. Subsidies, if you don't know, are financial aid that the government provides to support a specific activity, whether that's a business or even a type of farming practice, or it could be an industry that is seen as socially, economically beneficial for that country. They could also privatize government-owned industries. That would really take their hands off the economy. Then we could see them opening the economy to foreign direct investment or promoting ways for foreign direct investment to occur. And this can boost growth and an active global market if you are expanding its foreign influence. In Mexico, for example, we had the approval of NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, that enabled free trade amongst North American countries in Mexico. They also joined the World Trade Organization, again, promoting that trade and foreign direct investment. They cut subsidies to farms, and they privatized telecommunications and airline industries. In the UK, under Margaret Thatcher, who was Prime Minister a bit ago, the UK underwent privatization of a variety of state-owned industries. They also deregulated financial markets, and they also just overall had a focus on free market principles. So various measurements can occur. So political economic systems in our course countries, not very measurements, I'm talking about actual measurements here, can be compared through different ways of measuring your economic development, your economic growth, human development, wealth, and equality. We actually talked about this in the very first part of this course, in lesson 1.1. So we can measure the amount of growth in an economy as well as the size of the economy and how developed the country is. So GDP growth rate are two that you're probably a little more familiar with. GDP is your domestic production and government spending. And yeah, GDP growth rate is just how much that grows each year. We see that China here has the highest GDP growth rate. This is 7 years ago. It's still roughly up there. And then this also provides the United States as a reference point. If you don't know what's high, what's low, what's kind of in the middle, what's mediocre, what's superior, that sort of thing. So we can see here that the United States actually does have the highest GDP in the world. China is the second highest GDP at 12. This isn't even $12 billion. This is $12 trillion. For reference here. We also have per capita GDP, which is just GDP divided by the total number of people in the country. You won't have to do any math on the AP exam, but you need to know what this formula is. And the significance to this is China, Mexico, and Nigeria. As you can see here, we can see the change is that China has seen more change in their GDP per capita than Mexico has. Mexico and China are roughly the same GDP per capita. However, Nigeria is still kind of lagging behind. It's seen a lot of change, though, as well. But it's getting there. And then we also have the Gini index, which measures inequalities in wealth. So GDP measures the economy size. GDP growth rate measures the economic development, and Gini index measures the economic inequality. And we can see here that the higher the Gini index, the more inequalities there is. So Mexico, according to this table, had the highest amount of economic inequality, while the UK was the lowest. So what are these goals that governments have when they implement economic liberalization policies? So these are implemented by our course countries of both authoritarian and democratic regimes. And they have various goals of basically improving their economy and possibly curtailing undesirable conditions and circumstances. So they could be trying to limit the unemployment rate going up or reduce economic productivity and output and exports. There could be external situations such as lack of foreign direct investment or tariffs going up in other countries. They could be in trade deficits because of this. There could be a decreasing demand for raw materials like petroleum, natural gas, and rare earth metals. That could be a predominantly strong part of their GDP, and they're going to try to make up for that loss. So in China, they've implemented special economic zones. They're called SEZ, special economic zones. You can abbreviate them. On your FRQs, you could probably get away with abbreviating them as well, because this is a very common abbreviation that you'll see throughout the course. And it's a good chance that you'll be asked about something like this, even if it's just economic liberalization. You can possibly connect it to China's SEZ. So this is a great example of economic liberalization. This is the first one I would think of, is China's special economic zones. So what are special economic zones? Well, special economic zones are regions within China, typically near the eastern coastal area, to bring in foreign direct investment and encourage private entrepreneurship and private businesses and improve the productivity for manufacturing and trade and all that. And it's regional specific laws to increase that economic productivity and prosperity. Neoliberal policies. Neoliberal economic policies remove economic barriers and restrictions on what is considered internal and external economic actors. So the effects of these neoliberal economic policies, basically limiting barriers and restrictions on the economy. The effects of these is a reduction in inflation. So Mexico has passed monetary policy to reduce inflation. We can see increases in the national income. So in Russia, the boom in oil commodity prices have contributed to an increase in national income. We can also see growing inequalities. This is kind of it could be considered a more negative effect in wealth distribution. And in Nigeria, this is prominent due to wealth in the oil sector being concentrated in a few. They're not called anything, but they're pretty wealthy compared to the rest of the country. And the oil reserves are predominantly in the south as well, so that could leave regional inequalities. And as we said earlier, the oil prices, they fluctuate dramatically on the global market. So this impacts the country's revenue very much so. And it can also impact the country's revenue at unequal rates. There could also be persistent political corruption. Again, I'm kind of pointing to Nigeria here, where privatization has been criticized for lack of transparency and accountability in who's actually getting the businesses, or if it's really leaving the hands of the government. And this has led to a lot of allegations of corrupt practices in the sale of state assets. So let's discuss some more about neoliberal economic policies. So the exasperation of existing social tensions, this is a pretty it could be more of another effect of this, of neoliberal economic policies. So governments can balance economic freedom with policies that promote equality. It can also cause environmental pollution. So in China, weak enforcement of environmental regulations and inadequate penalties for noncompliance have allowed some industries, particularly those that have factories and big manufacturing roles in China, to neglect environmental standards. And it's not like China does have some sort of environmental regulations, but they really do not enforce any of it at all. And they're not held accountable for that as well. And even if they do hold someone accountable, they're going to give them a very harsh penalty. Remember that China has a 99.3% conviction rate. So neoliberal economic policies, when you have all this private and unrestricted development, you can have a lot of factories, you can have a lot of extraction and trade, and that involves transportation. And if you don't have regulations on that, then there could be some environmental consequences as well. There's always going to be some kind of a consequence to these actions. In economics, that can be referred to our opportunity cost, which is the highest value alternative that you give up. So you could give up a clean environment of some sorts. You don't need to know about that. It's just something I'm sharing with you. But economic policies can cause urban sprawl, as urban areas are typically where most of these jobs are going to be located, most of the production, most of the trade. The special economic zones in China are particularly in the eastern urban areas. The factories in Mexico, again, the northern urban areas. London is a major urban financial hub. So in Mexico, urbanization is occurred predominantly in the north, and this has led to severe uneven development. The south is very much so lagging behind compared to the north. We can see poor infrastructure be developed. This could possibly be due to the urban sprawl because they can't support the growing population that's exponentially growing. We can see regional migration, again, from Mexico, from rural to urban, which is south to north, and in China, from rural to urban, west to east. The west is very much so more rural. As you get further to Mongolia, the more it's just dispersed, and there's nobody there, and it's hot, and it's desert-like, and it's kind of miserable. I get why people don't want to live there as much. We also see the increased use of automobiles and other engines using fossil fuels, and this can kind of tie back to the environmental pollution part. So these can cause implications for energy consumption, because obviously fossil fuels are used for energy, air quality from the emissions, and traffic congestion. That's pretty important as well, because traffic congestion can lead to increased amounts of energy consumption and air pollution as well. And that's a big topic that I don't have enough time to get into, that I'm very passionate about. If you want to talk to me about it, send me a DM on Discord. I would love to. They can also impact political parties. We talk about a lot of political, not political, economic and social and environmental effects, but there is a big, strong political party impact of economic liberalization and neoliberalism. So economic prosperity tied to liberalization policies has affected the power of ruling political parties among our core country political systems. So in China, the Communist Party initiated some neoliberal reforms to attract FDI and basically increase their economy, and this started around the 70s. That's kind of when they started putting in their special economic zones. And the goal was to increase the country's economic strength. However, they do control most of the major industries, and this is a state-managed capitalism sort of system. So it's not full communism, it's not full capitalism, it's state-managed capitalism. In Mexico, neoliberal economic reforms initiated by the dominant party in the 90s, the industrial, what was it called? The PRI party, Revolutionary Party. Gosh, is it Industrial Revolutionary Party? I think that's it, something like that. But these were followed by electoral reforms that allowed multi-party competition for governing power by the 2000s. By 2000, in Nigeria, the ruling parties have faced pressure from groups upset with the impact of globalization in both the areas impacted by oil production in the Niger River Delta region and the northern states, which are predominantly Muslim, with larger populations of these Nigerian Muslims that are opposed to the influx of Western culture, and they want to preserve their religious culture compared to a lot of people in the South, which is predominantly Christian. And they also have some resistance to certain aspects of Western culture. I'm sure they're resistant to forms of atheism and sects of Christianity that are not as prominent in Nigeria. In the United Kingdom, the Conservative Party faced pressure from groups of citizens upset with the impact of Brexit. So the Conservative Party, while itself was not the party directly involved with Brexit, that would be the Independence Party. But the Conservative Party over the Labour Party is certainly not as opposed to Brexit. And they faced pressure from citizens who were upset at the impact of Brexit because they were also the party that had a lot of power. So while they weren't directly involved in supportive of Brexit, they were the ones that, had the voices, and people went to them because that's who they believed to go to. They had two party leaders, though, that stepped down as prime minister because of their inability to lead the House of Commons to resolve policies related to withdrawing the UK's membership from the EU. They didn't withdraw from the EU until 2020. It took them a few years to get there. They had to find policies that would stabilize their withdrawal and limit any potential consequences, and also get to the official withdrawal process. Thanks so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. It's free, which means it costs $0, and it really does help me out. Leave a comment down below with any questions. I'll be happy to answer them. There's some links down below in the description with practice tests, key terms, guided notes, all that fun stuff. Head on over to the next AP Comparative video on some really cool political stuff.